Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you all here to the Prog Monster. So, we are here today to do an episode of the mini series we've been running called Monsters of the 70s. We are now on episode 5, which is going to feature this band, Kiss. So, for those of you who are new to the series and not really sure what we're doing here, basically, I'm just going to be talking about those bands. I picked 10 of them out for the 1970s. I think had huge impact and huge influence. Very few bands had as much impact as Kiss did, and quite a bit of influence as well, so it appears. One of the great live bands of the time. Maybe not so great at the end because they're a lot older, and doing the stuff they do takes a lot of energy out of you to try to carry, especially for a guy like Gene Simmons carrying all that body armor around at 70 years old. That's tough, right? So to me, this is a band that started it for me, really. I was 11 and 12 years old when I discovered them, and at the time, I couldn't imagine anything being greater than them. I was driven by them. You walked into my bedroom from ceiling to floor, all the walls, every square inch had a Kiss poster on it of some sort. That's the way it was for the first 2 or 3 years or more, maybe 3.5 years of my rock history. I did have a little bit prior to them, but wasn't really that much, really. And then they came on, and I wouldn't listen to anything else, mostly unless I was somewhere and somebody was listening to somebody else. But basically, they were the band for me from about 75 through to about the mid-1978. And even then, even though I started to kind of break out into other bands, they were still the dominant factor. So Kiss, this was the biggest album for me. I think it's their biggest album of all time, selling about 9 million copies. Nice shot there at the back, too. I still love this album. It's probably still my favorite Kiss album. It's had a little bit of a down spiral the last couple of years, and the Ace Frehley album kind of came on, replaced it a bit, but overall, I still think it's my favorite album. So Kiss had 20 studio albums plus an additional 4 solo studio albums, I would call them, in which each member of the original members had their own solo album under the Kiss logo. Also, this year they're celebrating 50 years for these 2 albums, Kiss Destroyer and Kiss Rock and Roll Over, 2 of their best albums. Rock and Roll Over is probably my favorite of the 2 there, but I still like them both quite a bit. So for notable things for me is that they were honored into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2014. If you ask me, it was 20 years past when they should have been in there. But they eventually got in there, and I think they got in there because they had no choice. They had to put them in there. Too many people were screaming for it. Their song Beth also won the People's Choice Award for Best Songs of 1977. So they've had a few accolades, and recently got put into the presidential, what do they call that? Presidential awards, and they were nominated into that last year in 2025. So my history, so the history of this band goes like this. So basically, Gene and Paul, who formed the band, were with a band called Wicked Lester, and I think they actually had a record deal, but for some reason it didn't pan out, and they went on their own and had an idea that they wanted to do, which was what they created ultimately with Kiss, and they needed a couple of more musicians for that. They did auditions. They took Peter. They seen him in an ad in one of the magazines, which said drummer willing to do anything to make it. That was the perfect guy for them. They brought him in, and I think they really liked his voice, and I can understand why, because to me, he has the best voice of the 4 of them in the band. It's just some really good heavy stuff, and this may be his best album vocally. As far as I'm concerned, under the Kiss logo, he had Baby Driver on this and Hard Luck Woman, which he just absolutely nailed both times. Go Baby Driver, gonna keep alone. Yeah, just he has such a wonderful voice, I think. Really, they all had good voices, but he just, I think, had the best voice of the bunch. Then from there, they put out album after album. Actually, they got Ace Frehley. He came to audition for the guitar player, the lead guitar part. Came in and interrupted somebody else doing his part. And he had I think it was a red and a blue shoe or a red and an orange shoe. Showed up. Basically, he got dressed in the dark, and you know what happens. You're dressed in the dark, you don't always get the colors matching. So he showed up, got the job. I don't think they gave it to him initially right away, but then they eventually had him come in. And I think that was a huge, important move because Ace Frehley has some of the most iconic guitar solos in rock history as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, he may not be the greatest guitar player of all time, but boy, that guy could put together some iconic sounding guitar solos. Anyways, so their history went, and they became the biggest band in the world, probably in 76 and 77. At that time, they were a rock phenomenon. Their shows sold out everywhere. Probably the largest band at that time period. Hugely influential to a lot of bands going forward because everybody at that time period that was around my age was listening to these guys or was hating these guys, one or the other. For my own personal history, I started listening to them when I was 11 and 12. I listened to them exclusively, purchasing first Alive as a used album that I bought at the used record label store down the street. Then I got Destroyer after my parents blew that one. I got that album. Then I got Rock and Roll Over. Then I began to go back, getting Hotter Than Hell. And going forward, getting all of the Kiss solo albums. Love Gun. Kiss Alive 2. Eventually, the two that probably took the longest for me to get were Dress to Kill and their debut album, which took me probably almost in my 20s before I got them. But anyways, I eventually got all of those original ones. They were, for a very long time, my favorite band. Eventually, I grew out of them, but their music I still have all their CDs. I still listen to them on occasion. I listen to Rock and Roll Over today. Still have a very I guess an emotional attachment to them, a nostalgic attachment to them, going back to the early 70s, mid 70s anyways for me. The original members of this band, or the classic members of this band, are Peter, Chris, Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons, and Ace Frehley. I also would like to throw Eric Carr in there because he also had his own Fox thing that he did for, I think, maybe 2 albums or 3 albums, I can't remember. Anyways, and unfortunately he passed away in the 90s. But the other guys who have come after that, different people that played in the bands, I really only think of them as employees. Maybe I give a little more to Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer because they've been with the band for a very long time now, probably more than 20 years for the both of them. But they still are just employees. And the reason I know that is because when when Paul and Gene decided to hang it up, those guys didn't get a say. But I don't think that you've seen the last of Kiss either. I think you will see them again in some form. Maybe a bunch of different guys in the costumes of Kiss doing tours as Kiss. What we would call, what was the name of that movie? I can't even think of the name of it. But they will all be there again. I'm sure it's going to happen. Gene and Paul will not miss a chance to make any money. That is for certain. So I'm sure you will see them all again. Avatars, that's what I was thinking of. You're going to see some avatars of Kiss, and I'm sure they will be back playing some of these. They might even make new albums. You don't know, right? You don't know. I mean, there are bands out there who are playing now who do not have any original members of the bands in them. Foreigner comes to mind. There's a few others. Yes comes to mind. Most recent Soft Machine, there's nobody original in that band either. There's quite a few bands like that out there now, and you're going to see that some of these bands will continue forward long past the time when everybody from the original thing is gone. So that's my take today. Kiss is the band, which is the Monsters of the 70s, episode number 5. We will be back next week with another episode as we work down the 10 bands that I've chosen for this particular series. The next band will be Rush. If you want to know a little bit more about Rush, obviously I have quite a few videos on them, so you can check up on them too, but I think most people know who they are. And we'll be doing them next week on Monsters of the 70s. So I will see you all then. Please hit the like and subscribe. If you want to make any comments on anything I've said, you can do that in the comment section below. Or if you just want to talk about the band or the albums or the songs, you can do that as well. Also, Scott Lade has recently done an episode on his own channel talking about the best song on each of the Kiss albums. I think it's well worth watching that too. I don't know how he picked out a best song for each album. That's, to me, almost an impossible task. But the guy took it on, so you got to give him his credos for that. Anyways, we will see you all next week for another episode of Monsters of the 70s, and I'll see you then. Take care. Have yourself a good day and a good evening. Goodbye here from the Prog Monster.